Hello and welcome to another edition of Relatable. I am your host, Stephanie Michelle. Today we're going to be talking about sex. Yeah. Depending on what statistics you pay attention to, sexual relations is either on a decline or made really easy via hookup dating apps. As I walk around my downtown neighborhood, I tend to believe people are not having enough sex just by the way they carry themselves, avoid eye contact, and look pretty sad in general. I believe many people, especially our politicians, could benefit by getting their sexy back. I highly recommend binging on Queer Eye on Netflix for starters. That will help. It's an awesome show. The desire for social connection and sexual relations is similar in many ways. There are negativities that impacted by stress, low self-esteem, and traumatic experience that keep us unwell. And yet, when we strike a healthy relationship in our sex and our social life, we feel better, we live longer, and we're much more resilient. The difference between our sex lives and our social lives might be privacy and variety. In the age of social media, digital shopping, and online hacks, nothing seems very private for long. I advocate for keeping some things mysterious and off social media. Opinion, sound bites, the family dirty laundry, and sexual contact are on my privacy list. In terms of variety, well, the kinds of sex that are out there is endless. Sexy frontman Sting once said, "If God had something better than sex to offer, he's certainly keeping it quiet." I believe in God and a God that created sex for us to enjoy. And there's all kinds of ways to enjoy it. The variety is endless. It's all about finding your thing. My guest is an encourager and an expert in sexual variety. Sounds good, right? This is going to be a great show. Let's meet her. And by the way, we lit the show for sex. So if you see the candles, yeah, this is what we're doing. So Jamila Dawson is a marriage therapist, a family therapist, and a sex and relationship therapist, activist, and a speaker. Her goal is to break down stigma and increase understanding about alternative sexualities. As a kinky, queer, and polyamorous woman, she educates on sexual pleasure and wellness to mental health professionals and to the general public. In particular, her work focuses on personal development and helping people in the kink, polyamory, swingers communities, and explore their sexuality and enhance their relationships. Her work is grounded in interpersonal neurobiology, relational gestalt, liberation psychology, and the politics of pleasure. I just like saying that. Jamila has lectured at the USC, Antioch University, Los Angeles, collaborated with sex educators like Tristan Taormino, as well as BuzzFeed, Playboy, Harper's Bazaar, and other media outlets. If you're watching via Facebook Live and have questions, please share in the comments, or if you want to keep it private, that's cool too. I'll make sure you can share. I'll share how to get hold of Jamila after the show. So with that being said, welcome.
Thank you.
Do you like our sexy mood lighting?
I love it. I'm like, oh yeah, I can relax.
Bring it down.
Yeah.
You have candles on the set. I love it.
I actually really do love candles. I always
too.
feel better when they're around.
Really?
Yeah.
Candles, incense, right? Like, I mean, all that stuff.
Aromatherapy, I did that today.
Did you? Helps you just get there, get in the mood?
Yes.
Well, so welcome.
Thank you.
One thing that I always ask guests before we dive into our topic, is there anything that you just want to put out there clear that's maybe holding your attention?
Yeah, I just found out a friend of mine has early, it's cancer, but they've caught it early enough. But it's worrisome, and this is somebody who doesn't have a significant other who lives with them. So I'm just I found that out today, this morning. So I'm just kind of sitting with that.
How to care for this person. We don't think about this, when you go through something traumatic, how much a community.
Right, you need.
Yeah.
You need. And how do we design that on the fly?
Yeah.
When it's outside of those typical boyfriend or husband or wife or partner, nesting partner.
Well, I'm glad she has you as her.
Them.
I'm glad them has you as a friend to, figure it out. Bake some casseroles.
I'll have to learn how to make a casserole.
Somebody knows. Somebody in that community.
Google.
Knows. Well, so, we're going to talk about sex. I know that you're a therapist and an expert, but can you share, are you willing to share your own sexual revolution or evolution to?
Yeah, because I very much believe in there should not be a radical difference between how I show up as a personal, like an individual, versus how I show up as a professional. Obviously, there has to be lines, but I think it's important for people to, like, let's share stories.
Right.
I'm a human. So I would say I've spent about a decade working in adult stores that were education based, which was absolutely rad. And I think I walked in, I wouldn't have said at the time, but like, oh, I was a straight girl. Like, just, I was interested in guys, like, that was it. But I did not know the options that were out there. Right, like what was possible. And you start reading and you're like, oh my gosh. So, over the time that I've been working around sexuality and exploring it on my own, my identity has absolutely changed. I'm queer.
Define that for people.
For me, that means that the relationship types that I get into are not going to be normative. The way that I like to have sex is not just focused on penis and vagina. And who I'm attracted to is not going to be determined by, like, oh, you read as a woman, so you're always have to be with a man or only with a woman. That there's a political aspect to how I fuck.
Queer in general, when it's used in the LGBTQ and now A's, right? There's a couple A's of
there's a lot. Like, I always just say LGBTQ plus, but the way that I talk about it with people, like, because sometimes people get irritated with, like, there's another letter. What's that? What's the problem? And I look at it like, if you discover another solar system, you don't just go, oh God, another solar system. That's how
That's
boring,
awesome.
all these stars and planets. Ugh. No, you're like, oh my God, we discovered something else. So you name it and you welcome it into the universe of known things. So
queer to me feels like curious, like it's always playful. When I hear the word queer,
expansive,
it's like,
and there definitely has like a political edge to it. It shouldn't feel super heady, but it should feel like I am not, I'm for the liberation, the sexual liberation of myself and for other people, and that I'm not going to be defined by one way of engaging with sex or one way of engaging with gender orientation.
When you say it that way, so I think of sex positive. How is that different? How would you describe
I would say for me, being queer is absolutely linked to being sex positive. And I think what we're seeing in quote unquote sex positive communities is some radical transformations that need to happen. That being sex positive is not, oh, we should all be having all the sex all the time, and if you don't want to have sex, what's wrong with you? That is not sex positive.
Right.
Sex positive is this idea that pleasure is wonderful, that everybody has their way of engaging erotically with one another, and if it's done consensually and with taking everybody's individual galaxy into mind, then that's important and that's necessary.
So you could be quote unquote asexual and be sex positive.
Right, and being asexual is a totally legitimate orientation, and so you can absolutely have an erotic life that is not like wanting to or absolutely engaging in sex, or sometimes it does, and that doesn't make you not sex positive. It makes you exploring your sexuality.
So what I hear is like being sex positive is just taking, there's no shame in it. There's no, you know, this is the way that you do it, and this is the way you can, or you have to do, or you're not curious enough or exploratory enough until you do this. Like there's none of that language. It's just like, hey,
what feels good to us right now, or to all of us right now. But it's been used to bludgeon people into like, oh, you're not having more sex, or you're not doing it the way I want, you're not being sex positive. That's coercive, and that's not.
That's not it. Okay, so I love this term, politics of pleasure. When I read it in your bio, I was like, oh, yeah, we need to talk about that, because I think there's definitely things that are governing, in particular, our American culture around that.
Goodness, yes.
Talk more about that, and maybe talk about maybe how we can be encouraged to really look at what's out there and how that may or may not fit who you are.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of that term, what I'm trying to get at is that the personal is political. How you do any interaction is your character, and that's what your politics really are. What your character is, what you believe about the world, what is the world that you want to see. So your politics are deeply personal, and I want people to imbue their politics in their life with more pleasure that's intentional, that's thoughtful, that's connective. And so what we have in this culture is a very, I'll just say, a very sick relationship to pleasure, a very fragmented one. We either completely push it aside, that pleasure is like indulgent and not good for you, or we make it this very individualistic, capitalistic thing. You go buy your pleasure, and you usually dismiss the people who provide that pleasure for you, whether it's sex workers or masseuses. We like purchase it, but we also kind of deride the people who provide that. And what I'm looking for is a world that's much more mutual about it, much more embodied about the pleasure that we have, and that it both happens in our sex, but it also happens like when I'm looking at somebody in a conversation, can I tell that this is what I call a yummy conversation?
Yeah.
Does it make us like, this is really, I feel good after. So good, maybe I want a cigarette.
Yeah.
Like I've had conversations like that, and I love them, and I want people to have more of that.
I love that. I'm so right there with you. You know, especially, so I'm just thinking about work right now, and like sometimes like in a conversation about work, you know, that task that you have to get done, it's like, we could talk about this and this be more pleasurable. Like, I mean, and why aren't we? Like, this is painful right now. Like, everything about this conversation, you know, is painful. I even think, this just popped in my head, so I'm going to share it. Like, I remember my first jobs in ad agencies, and I was the first one to go in and like unscrew this horrible fluorescent lights and put like a lamp in my office, because it was like, I'm gonna be here a lot. Like, this is sucking the life out of me. This can't be.
Like, I can feel this is not what I want to have in my environment.
And yet I was viewed as like, oh, that's so weird, or look at like look at her going for her own pleasure. I mean, come on, you know.
Right. How could you do that? And we as a culture do that. If the people who are seeking out new ways of being or changing their environment in some way, we're like, oh, that's so too much, weird, strange. And I'm like, no, that's what humans are supposed to do.
Totally.
You shift your environment to be more in alignment with yourself.
And still thinking about work, because
we all work a lot.
We work a lot. We were talking about this off camera. You know, when I put a proposal in front of a client and it's this much, and these are the resources that I need to do that work, like, I'm doing it in a way that I know it's going to put my best self forward, which is joyful, pleasurable, you know. And so, hey, if you want my best self, let me enjoy this. Right.
These are the things, these are the elements that will help me show up with that. And
so I think, there's some laterals in sex. It's like, if you want my best self in this with you, please let me enjoy this too. You know,
Please don't just do this at me.
Let's try to enjoy this together. I get it.
And not expecting that somebody is going to show up the way we want them to show up, but instead being curious about what is it that you need in order to show up as your best
Isn't
self.
it crazy too? I'm just thinking, like, most people's first sexual experiences, they like just kind of, they're happenstance, they just like fall into it, and then there's a lot of emotion afterwards. Well, duh, like, you didn't, like, it's the most intimate thing you can do with another person, and you didn't talk about it, and you didn't like let you guys sort of have a game plan, or at least like
construct it, or like, what is it that we want to do? It's, I mean, people, there's always these like hurried, stuffed moments, you know, like, get it in, do the thing, like, hope it turns out okay. And like, for me, the analogy is with food. Like, you can eat like that sometimes, where you're like, okay, I've got some like tuna fish and like some like pickles, and I don't know what else is in there. We'll just like eat, like, we just gotta eat. But when you like make it, of like, I want to make a meal, there's it's so much more enjoyable the whole way through.
That's it's a good analogy. All right, let's talk about the fun stuff. So what's the biggest misconception about alternatives to monogamy? Like, that's a big question, I know.
That is a big question. I would say what I see is people, it'll break my relationship apart. Well, first, there's a lot of people, like, it's just wrong. Like, sex outside your marriage or a relationship that's sexual or erotic outside your relationship is just wrong. Can't do it, don't do it. Then it'll blow your relationship apart. It won't be sustainable. And then people will usually say, oh, I get jealous, so I couldn't do it. So, and I never try to convince anybody of anything. Like, that's not my job. What I'm looking for are people to help who are like, I know stuff is going to come up. How do we do this?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, jealousy is going to come up. And yeah, relationships do shift and move, but those aren't actually bad things.
Yeah.
We just, we act like jealousy is a reason to stop something. We act like pain is a reason to stop. And pain is a signal that you should pay attention to. Yeah. But I ask people, like, there's going to college or getting certain jobs. Yeah. These were not easy. They were painful, but there was value that you saw that made it worth continuing on. And you were never going to build internally or with somebody else or a world that's worth having if you're avoiding pain and discomfort.
It's like growth of any kind. Yeah. You've got to kind of like, okay,
like,
let's
have you seen what it looks like?
Yeah.
Have you seen what birth looks like? Or when you see a plant growing? That's not like, oh, here I am.
Yeah.
Like, it is.
Well, that's the Facebook version of birth.
Right.
Like,
like, oh,
look at this baby.
Right.
Like,
it was there and now it's not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It takes energy.
Yeah. So I went somewhere and now I forgot what I was going to say. I know. So do you see, as a therapist, do couples come together and say, you know, we want to explore this? Or is it one person, you know, is there a norm? Like,
I would say it's a mixture. Sometimes what usually happens, because people are not the same, and even in relationship, one person is more curious, has already moved a little bit further down the path of like, I really want us to try this, or I really want to explore this. So if partners come in, there's usually a bit of a mismatch in comfort with it. And so kind of giving them space to, like, somebody is going to be a little more excited about this, somebody's going to be a little more hesitant, and normalizing both, because sometimes it can be like, what's wrong with you? Or you've already been thinking about this too much, like, you don't want me now. And it's like, that's grief and surprise and shock are normal and acceptable. And then having the person who's a little further along have some empathy for the, like, you've known this about yourself. They're just learning this.
Yeah.
How can we, like, get them up to speed and understand that this is not because there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
So let's try to have some baseline.
And provide both parties to have a safe place to kind of talk about really
where they are.
Yeah, and you know what it looks like to get in or change or get out. Like,
right. What could it look like right now? What I do tend to see, at least when I worked at the adult stores, was in straight couples that the guy would be super gung-ho about trying something, like threesomes, anal, what are, like, I want to do it. And, you know, if I would ask him, like, well, can she play with your ass? And he'd be like, I mean, you could just hear him tighten right up. And I'm like,
it's like a zipper just.
And I'm like, I mean, he's imploding and like, and I'm like, well, if you want to play with her ass, she can't, like, the ass is completely gender neutral.
Right.
Why can't that be mutual?
Right.
You might want to take a look at what assumptions you're making.
Yeah.
And then when it came to, like, threesomes or swingers, what I found is, the guy is like, yeah. And then was like, I don't know. And then they go to something and the woman just dives right in, is having a great time, like having like orgasms and pleasure and bodies. And the guy's like, oh God, this is not what I thought. I thought I was going to be getting all this. I'm like, well, when you open things up, you cannot predict. And this wasn't just about you.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Like, I'm almost thinking like women in general, you know, are just like when you're tuned into your feminine energy, like you're used to feeling your way through a situation. So when a scenario comes up that like, okay, well, I don't know, but I'm curious about it, like you can kind of anticipate the different feelings that you're going to have, where maybe when you're more into your masculine energy, it's like you're not thinking about that, so that is more of a surprise once it's like go time.
Right.
I
mean, I think men are socialized in a very particular way that like it will look like this, and this is what I want, and this is the goal, and it doesn't leave them much space to see how they feel in the moment, or to be able to tolerate the complexity of what they're feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
And they end up feeling pretty lost, and then usually angry when really it's just hurt and confusion. So I'd say a lot of my work too is working with straight men to like, okay, we want to get beyond like a Crayola box basic of color emotions and kind of get more of a spectrum and give you space to learn how you feel and then how to share that in a way that's congruent with you.
This is why I binged on Queer Eye this weekend.
I've been hearing
love
great
this
stuff.
damn show. I love those guys, you know, because I'm seeing, we're going to talk about this, you know, I'm just gonna get goosebumps thinking about this. These like serious hate groups against women, these like really misogynistic hate groups against women, and my heart, I have a lot of heart space for these people because I know that they somehow got socially isolated and like they don't have the skills, and when I see these 5 guys like go into like they're in like conservative Georgia, working with men to just like, hey, get your sexy back, you know, like this is what it looks like and how joyous it is. I've cried almost on every episode. That should be accessible to people with masculine energy. Like like we are 2018, you know,
like come on,
we can all feel things and it's okay, and like no woman is gonna
decorate ourselves and to like have pleasure. Again, like pleasure in the clothes that you wear instead of same old thing or let me hide behind hair. And I think a lot of men are wanting to figure that out, and there's not enough outlets for that. So Queer Eye, like this iteration of it, I've cried of just like, yes,
so good.
Because it's personal growth and development. Like the other stuff is the dressing for that. But you're watching transformation.
And I think that, you know, the misconception is like there's this energy that people say masculine energy is under attack, or like male as we know it traditionally is under attack, and it's like, no, actually there's a softening, there's a love and a space and a pleasure, I think, for everybody. Like I think that's what's going on. It's like, look, everything is accessible to you. Like we don't, you know, I am a heterosexual, but I don't need a man to like this all the time.
Bring
like,
this,
I mean, I need the fullness. I need the realness. I have masculine energy. I need you could be feminine sometimes because I've got it, you know, like it's cool. But so I feel like it's more of an opening invite to experience all of that. And it, like I said, it saddens me to see people go, oh no, men that feel like they're under attack because they've got to be a certain
type of masculinity. And I do, to me, the term like toxic masculinity is very separate from masculinity and what it could be. There's this great meme, I think somebody was saying like, well, show me a version of masculinity that's not toxic. And somebody showed Mr. Rogers. And I was like, like that was his masculinity. That was nourishing and gentle and like, but had a firmness to it.
Structured, like you could count on them.
So it's, and I think the differences between like gender, everybody has their individual gender. There is no 2 and there's not just 5. Like how your identity is, how you express it, completely unique. I go back to that galaxy analogy, like, and that's why I can have space for people that people might not otherwise. So I'm like, I'm looking at a galaxy. I want that to expand, and I want to give space for that. And I want women or people who femmes, like feminine energy is not to be dismissed or ridiculed, and nor is masculine energy. What I want is people to like dive into yourself and then bring that to somebody else. And ideally people can welcome that.
I love that. How I connect to that is, you know, I've gone through a lot of growing in my life and all different versions of myself, and what I've found feels the best and feels more loving is being authentic. No, you know, not comparing myself to anything on social media or reading top 10 ways you should be more, whatever. Like those those things are so
those
terrible.
Are toxic.
Terrible. I call it fast food content. It's like it's just
this is not healthy for you. If you consume too much of this, it will damage your system.
Totally. So the idea of like every person being able to be authentically themselves is something that I definitely subscribe to, because that to me creates more love in the world. Like, you know, that like when we're walking in our true, like this is who I am, I feel better, I'm gonna interact with, you know, I can see things more fully, you know.
Options become available.
That should not be denied to anybody. So that's where my space in the galaxy opens up. I might not understand it. I'm always curious. Like I don't know a lot, but I'm always curious. I'm like, tell me, because there's always something, even in our differences, there's always something that's going to connect us too. So it's like, I'm not scared of what the difference is. No, it's like, I'll find something where we're like, okay, we'll connect. We'll sort for differences, but we're going to sort for similarities at some point.
And those are not threatening. Your difference does not mean bad or that I'm not going to be allowed to live if we're both agreeing to our basic humanity.
Yeah.
And that is something that I will continue to learn and continue to remind myself and others of. If somebody cannot agree that you are a human, that you are deserving of basic things, I am not interested in conversation with them.
I agree with that.
So there are certain, like, a certain level of racism, a
Yeah.
certain level of misogyny
Yeah.
that I'm like, no, we will continue to change the world, the rest of us, and we'll pick you up when we turn back around.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Yeah.
we won't.
I don't make space for just blatant, straight up hate. It's
Absolutely
like,
not.
you've no, you know,
Won't do it.
it won't do
You
it.
do not
Agreed.
get to, like, have a platform.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Not this platform. All right, more fun stuff. So if someone is kink curious, is there a best way to approach this with a partner, and what if you don't have a partner?
Go kinky people, I just want to say that.
Go kinky people, is that what you said?
Just go kinky people.
Wait, should we back up? What do you describe, how do you describe kinky? What does it mean to you?
I mean, to me, it's, you know, there's the more kind of clinical term like non-normative sex. I call it creative sexualities. So many of us have been taught that, like, something has to go into something, that orgasm has to come from very particular places. And, oh, that's so dull. That's so dull. And as part of my own sexual evolution, when I came across kink, and I realize now that so many of my early fantasies were about a power exchange, but I just had no language for it. And also a big misconception that you must have been abused to be interested in kink. Completely not true. There's all this great research that's like, we haven't experienced any more trauma than anybody else. And in fact, we tend to be, like, happier and more well-adjusted because we're like, oh, I did that thing that I really wanted to do last Saturday.
Yeah, what came up for you when you're sharing that is, like, power in so many terms in our world is sort of corrupt when you look at it.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad thing to
No.
have power. So I could see where, like, hey, it's a healthy thing to just, like, I just want to be curious about power. I want to play with that a little bit because
There it is.
I don't see it.
Played with the way that it is out there.
Yeah.
Is
It's not playful power.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's abusive power.
Yeah.
And really, for me and for some of the people that I play with, that is power is what we're playing. It's the sexiest thing out there.
It's like a board game for it's like a sexy board game.
Yeah, like you get to, it's 3-dimensional, it's like live action role play, but it's actually real.
Yeah.
And that's what BDSM really is. You get to play with power and you get to design it and construct it with somebody else. With
Plus, you get to wear a lot of cool leather.
Yeah, you do.
Let's just be real.
Leather, I just got into latex recently. I'm
I saw that.
Oh my God.
I saw that picture.
Woo! It's so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun. Thank
Why
you, my
is that
friend.
a thing? So I get the leather. I don't get the what is it? Just how it feels? Or?
It actually transmits sensation in a way that's completely different than anything else that I've felt. And I went to a class because I still go to sex classes. So this person was teaching this class and he had us feel him and got pieces of latex that people could feel. And
was he wearing a unitard and
it was a full body suit.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a full body suit. And you can just feel, it's very sensual in a way that skin isn't. Skin has its own sensuality.
Yeah.
But latex, because it's so smooth, it just feels phenomenal. So that is something new that happened for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was into latex. Now I am.
I can get that. A little reveal. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm just going to go for it. It's not that big of a thing, but I definitely am into touchy, feely things. So remember the old blankets that we had that were kind of foamy, and then they had that bindery, like the satin bindery at the top.
Yes.
So as a kid, I would rip that off, and it was it was the thing. I have pieces at my desk right now. I'm not gonna lie that I will as a stress reliever. It's cold. I put it between my finger.
It's soothing.
Yeah. So I imagine the furries, the people that dress up and that's a feel thing too, right?
Right. There's a sensuality to it. There's you get to be this creature, this other thing that's both you and something else.
Yeah.
And the way that I describe it to people, being an adult, you've probably noticed, is pretty stressful. It's pretty.
Not gonna lie.
You have to adhere to certain things. It can be a little exhausting.
Yeah.
And whether it's furries or being a kitten or being a slave or these other pieces, you get to relax into this other part of yourself. You get to play with all the creativity that we had as children, but in a whole realm that's solely for adults.
Yeah.
And so much more is available. And I I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Is there something that you haven't tried that you are curious about?
I'm sure there is. I just don't know what like so
I
there's
love her voice change. She's like, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
There's an event that I go to every year that happens in Palm Springs, an all-women's event. And the kind of play that we do there, I don't see it anywhere else. And so for me, that is a place to explore new aspects of myself. And every time, what I've learned is, like, I'll go back. When I first realized I was interested in BDSM, I was freaked out. I was like, this is weird. Do black people even do this? Is this a white person thing? There was a lot of messages that I didn't realize I was carrying until I was so frightened. But what I found is, like, you're not going to become some monster. You actually, I've just become more myself. Well,
even in these environments where you can play with this, people are setting some guidelines, right? Like you talk about safe words.
Oh, absolutely. And there's more guidelines there. Like, I don't feel particularly safe at your average bar. I really don't.
Nobody does.
I feel much safer at a dungeon where if I say red, or if I say please don't touch me, or I'm not interested in that, or I would like to play with you but not right now, completely acceptable, completely welcomed. And in that community,
well, what's coming up, because these people are sex positive, so if you express what you're feeling at that time, they're not going to shame you for feeling it. Like there's at least that level of, like, you know, we're all
a baseline.
We're here to, everybody gets to experience their pleasure in a way that they want to. And so communicate that, and there's no shame in that.
And even within that community, because BDSM is not locked off from the rest of the world. Polyamory is not locked off from the rest of the world. And so people bring in their trauma, people bring in, and bringing your trauma isn't the problem, but bringing in your abusive coercion tactics, that's a problem. And so I do see, like, abuses that occur. And so that's why the education piece is so critical, like why there's a dungeon safe word. Every dungeon you go to will have, if you call red, people will stop and check in with you. Like, that doesn't happen outside of there. If I say during a scene, oh, yellow, can you slow down on this piece or that piece?
Did you say scene? You say during a scene, what do you mean by that?
So a scene is what you agree to do for that hour or that evening. So it can be like, I want flogging, and I want some, like, spanking, and I want some needles. And it's like, if all that's happening and, like, you know, the flogging is getting, like, it's too much on one side, then somebody can say, like, oh, yellow, can, like, you know, can you ease up on that, please?
Got it.
So it's a great way to just communicate, and I wish more, part of my journey is to move that language and those understandings out into the general culture.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just going to say. Like, what I'm hearing as a person that, you know, cares so much about how we're communicating with each other, and seeing the decline in the quality of how we're relating. What a way to, like, really up your communication game is to go through this. And it's like, look, I've communicated a sex dungeon, and I can handle an elevator, an awkward ride in an elevator.
Absolutely.
You know, like,
once you start talking about your fantasies or what you like, what you don't like in real time, and somebody holds that with you and says, okay, I can adjust, or sure, I've got you. It, like, what, I want this all the time, everywhere. And what if more of us asked and demanded it to be everywhere? That's how you shift culture. That's how you get a consent culture. You do it because you're like, oh, I know what that feels like, and I want other people to feel that way.
I love this. So we kind of got off topic, and it was my fault. So if two people are in a relationship and they're wanting to experience some kinks and some, you know, try some different things, what do you recommend to them?
There's different, I'm a bookworm. I love books. And someone's like, go read a book, go find a really good book. There's ones by Tristan, there's Playing Well with Others by Melina Williams, which is how to kind of get into kink and what to expect. Love that book, and Playing Well with Others.
We'll share that in the archives, make sure to ask you that.
You can also go to classes. The Pleasure Chest has free classes, I believe, every Wednesday. And even if you're not into something, learning about it will still benefit you. You'll learn.
You still get to decide.
It might change. Things that I've seen when I first started, I'm like, nope, I will never do that. No. I saw a really hot scene, and I'm like, well, maybe I'm a little more open. So things change over time. There's also Threshold Society, which is a BDSM education-based dungeon in North Hollywood, and they have classes. I think they're like $10 on all kinds of things. So those I would suggest, and you don't have to do anything. You're literally sitting there and watching.
Yeah.
So I think those are great ways of like, let's just go, see how we feel, breathe, talk it out once we leave, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
But never push yourself past.
So you can go to sex stores and they'll be able to tell you. They can. Well, I'm sure they've heard every question. You don't need to be embarrassed.
There is nothing that I haven't heard at this point.
Yeah.
Like,
so you can go to stores. They might even be able to tell you about classes. You can take a class, or you can find a therapist like you if you want to like. If
people want coaching, because I definitely make a distinction between coaching and therapy. Therapy is more in depth. There's usually some trauma that we're working through, and it's kind of longer term. Coaching is like, let me troubleshoot something for you. You want to know what to do. I used to teach blowjob classes, not on somebody, but like how to do them. Those were my most popular classes at the Chest. And I had one. I do brag about this. I'm totally bragging right now.
Do it.
But I did my fellatio class because it was so boring the way that we had been doing it.
Yeah.
And so I changed it up and really like, how do you bring the whole body and not just focusing on the genitals? And so I taught this class. This woman like asked me a bunch of questions afterwards. And like a month later, she came back and she's like, he bought me a car. And it's like, I am not going to sit there and like judge you around like the dynamics of your relationship or like you as a woman should do this, that, or the other. She was so happy and excited. And I was like, well, I think I was a decent teacher. She was clearly a great student.
Apparently.
And he seemed like quite happy.
Yeah.
So like, I think we all won.
Yeah, I love that story.
And it's as long as it's consensual, letting people dictate the frame of their lives.
Yeah.
And I will say that sometimes consensuality is a murky place.
Yeah.
So what I also ask of people, do you feel expansive after what you've done? For me, that's a more deep question. Because people can agree to stuff that they don't actually really want to do.
Yeah.
And so my question for them, gently and with compassion, is like, did you feel expansive? Did you feel transformed? Did you feel more yourself?
So when you talked about the difference between coaching and being a therapist, have you been in situations where you're coaching somebody through this and you're seeing something that potentially they need to be in therapy for? Like, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I became a therapist, because I was seeing, you work 10 years in sex retail, and what you see are a lot of patterns. Like if you don't start to fall in love with what you're seeing, you can get burned out and really cynical about people. And so I started to just fall in love with like, what am I seeing with people? And what I saw was a lot of pain and a lot of, getting them a toy, getting her a clit toy or getting him like a pump or like getting, he wants to buy these pills for erectile dysfunction. That is only sort of dealing with the symptom, but there is something deeper. And I can't keep just giving you lube and thinking that I'm doing something.
Right.
I'm doing something powerful, we're doing something powerful, but it's not changing anything.
I feel like, and if I'm wrong, tell me, but I feel like there's some laterals between drug use and alcohol. Like, like you can, I'm pro drug use, I'm pro cannabis for sure, but I know there's a difference between people like using it to enhance a situation or to celebrate somebody, or as a means to escape.
Right.
Is it similar in some of these things?
Yeah, people use sex to escape all the time, which saddens me because I'm like, this thing that should be so connective, that can be so transformative, like anything else, when it's used the wrong way, it damages us. So I am explicitly and very clear, like sex addiction is not empirically supported. It is not the language I think is most effective for helping people, but there are absolutely people with a problematic relationship to sex or who are using, like people use sex, food, gambling, video games, drugs, we're using it to somehow mitigate our trauma and our pain. And that instinct, to me, is a life instinct. The body is trying to keep going, but we need to have a different way of doing it that, again, expands the person and builds relationship instead of isolating them.
Expanding is a really key element to this, is what I'm hearing. It's like,
Yeah,
you know, if you
could
feel
the
elevated
difference.
and, you know,
Elevated too.
yeah, I say vampiring a lot, like even just in a conversation with somebody, you can, you know, first interaction, like they can completely drain you, or like, oh, I'm really uplifted, like that was
Right.
amazing, like, and like you said
Yeah.
earlier, I want to do it again, you know, like this is
Yes.
this person, I want this person in my life.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That.
So, yeah, that's good stuff. That's the good stuff. All right, so
So I think I did answer your question, right?
yeah, you did.
So go to classes,
Go to
read
classes,
some books,
yeah.
like hit me up if you want like troubleshooting.
We're going to
there.
put your contact information. We're going to put those books that you mentioned too in the
Oh, yeah, and
archive.
there's a third
yeah,
book. That's really
definitely.
great too.
All right, so we have to talk about my favorite talking head in the media. I'm kidding. I do not like this person. But so Professor Jordan Peterson suggested recently that enforced monogamy would stop men from committing violent crimes. And he go on to say, and he only talks about heterosexual relationships.
No, because the rest of us don't exist.
Yeah, well,
right?
he knows they exist because he actually, his claim to fame, you're going to hate this if you don't know about this person. He is a professor in Toronto, at Toronto University. When some of the Canadian bills passed about pronouns with trans people, he came out as an advocate for free speech, saying he didn't have to use them. With this,
I love like this perverting of language.
Yeah.
Is fascinating.
well, I love that. You know what's really driving me nuts about people that say they're advocating for free speech, but they're really hate
Right,
speech.
advocating for hate speech.
Yeah,
Right.
is, you know, there's a fine line. Anyhow, this lovely person that I love so much suggested that men.
Like the sarcasm meter.
Yeah, do you like that? Did I roll my eyes? Was it clear enough? He suggested that men, you know, these young men that are committing crime, the school shootings, less of them would happen if women were giving out more sex.
Wow.
Yeah, love them.
Wow.
So I do believe that general society needs to have more sex. I'm all for that, but I'm, you know, looking more at the pleasure side of it, you know, and the expansive side of it. But suggesting what he suggested, I just think is so dangerous. Like, what do you think about this?
It's dangerous. Like, I literally feel sick to my stomach.
I know.
Even contemplating something like that. That this is somebody, one of my favorite authors is the satirist Terry Pratchett, who I'm still grieving his death. He was an amazing author. But he, in one of his characters in this book, says, all bad things start when you treat people like things. All bad things start when you treat people like things.
Yeah.
And I will never be able to forget, because it's so true.
It is true.
And what this, I guess I should call him a person. Although to me, when you make a statement like that, I think you've given up some of your humanity.
Yeah.
Is suggesting is like, you're treating women like things, that we are something to a commodity that you throw at these men, and then they have sex with us and somehow they won't commit violence. When you treat people like you've already committed violence, the violence will now be restricted to that one woman that this man is coercively having sex with, or really just assaulting and abusing. That's just abuse and assault. That is violence.
Yeah.
And so what he's telling me is like, oh, you're saying that there's an acceptable type of violence, that this, in trying to avoid these murders by these people who they clearly have issues, but that you offer sex like bait of another human being. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely
You
not.
know what's scary about him? He's not only an educator, but he is a psychologist, and he's saying things like this.
I will be the first to talk about my field, that people act as though psychology is some sort of, that it's above certain things. And we all know that the medical scientific community has a very, very frightening exploitative history. But he is in a position of power and a position to abuse that. And I am frightened by any students and any of his patients.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. And even his style of communication, so he's just like, he's contrary for the sake of being contrary, and like this whole debate everything.
Right,
because he actually,
Devil's
he talks
advocate.
so much, he actually says things every once in a while that I believe in, and he sometimes he even talks about personal responsibility, but in this equation, it's like, there's no personal responsibility. Young men that are committing violent acts, like,
Right, what about the responsibility for not pulling a trigger?
Right.
Not taking the lives of people.
Yeah.
But there's a personal responsibility that's disconnected from other people. and this is something I think we see in Western European culture, and particularly in America, this individualistic streak, that it begins and ends with me. And no, sex does not begin and end with you. Transformation does not begin and end with you. Freedom does not begin and end with you. That we take on relationships not as shackles, but actually as a thing that can liberate us.
Yeah.
So, Peterson.
Yeah, thank you. It's so frightening. I mean, this person, it is. Everybody in this room
It's one thing if
knows
he was standing on a street corner screaming. It's quite another when he's in a position to influence things.
Exactly.
Everybody get your PhDs, storm academia, become politicians, become educators. That's like, take over systems. Whatever level of leadership you can attain, that is your goal. Attain leadership, influence the system.
And don't let anybody tell you can't do that with heart.
Right.
You know?
With heart, with integrity, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Heart, curiosity, openness for other people. Like, yeah, all of those things.
Because it cannot be rigid, or else we're just like them. Audre Lorde.
Yeah. Okay, so talked about some fun stuff. You know, are there, let's talk about some parameters. I mean, well, we kind of got into this. Is there parameters between a healthy sex life and unhealthy relationship with sex? Like, how do we address maybe the issues of consent and pain, addiction? Like, maybe the better question is, as you're exploring these things and then you hit up against something where you're like, oh, I don't know, like, have I gone too far? Is there a question to ask?
Yeah, if you're on your own, like not dating anybody, there's still that reflection. Then you can turn to your friends, or you can turn to sex positive communities and people who speak about this. Because sometimes when we turn to our friends, they can be sadly really judgmental.
Yeah, before you turn to a friend, know that they're open and safe. And there might, you know, the age-old question, I'm asking for a friend. Like, I mean, like that kind of thing.
Right,
you know,
do
like,
what you need to do to keep yourself safe enough.
Find out if you're safe in that, because you don't want a relationship that you count on for something else to now not be there for you because they're not open to this part of you. Like,
right. Yeah. And people have a pretty good instinct. Sometimes we need to experiment with the boundaries of our relationships. Of maybe I can share this little piece, and there's ways to do that. Asking for a friend, or I saw this article, what do you think of that? Yeah. You know, or like one of our, like a new person that I met at work, you know, brought this up. Yeah. So there's ways to cloak it, and I don't shame anybody for that because sadly enough, sex is so loaded. Yeah. But there's that checking in. Do I feel okay with this? Do I want a little bit more? Do I feel like I can share with somebody about this? Because when it's that secretive, turned inward on itself feeling, that's a signal of like when it's that isolated sexuality, that's when I get concerned. Yeah. So the rest of your question, I think, was
I think you answered it, but what's coming up for me when you said that, sorry, we knew we were going to play footsies.
I know, right? Like,
show about sex,
like,
come on. We usually have the table here, but I'm like, no.
Oh, no, this is so
let's
much
keep
better.
the space clear. No, I've lost my train of thought. It sounds like to me, so when you are turning into something that keeps you from feeling the completeness, the fullness of all life, of all different aspects of life, enjoying your work life, enjoying your friends, your family, food, even like every other aspect. When one thing is cutting you off from the circle of life and everything else,
that's your signal.
That's your signal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the DSM has that official, like if it's causing distress in other areas of your life that you can't function, or your function is significantly reduced, then those are a signal of not that you are sick or bad, but that something is out of whack, something is off, and that you need support. Yeah. That's really what, it's a signal that you need support. So reach out.
Yeah, this also, and I know you're an advocate for this, we're also hitting on the stigma against mental health, like the check-ins, like it's so, it's nonsensical to me that there is a gym or a spin place or, you know, on a yoga, like on every corner, you know, we have all these things for physical, we have everything for, you know, health, food, but nothing like a little place you can go and check in, you know, other than therapy, which therapy is like an exercise for your mind and your heart, like, never, ever, ever let that be the thing that stops you. Like, it just,
right,
that's
find
a stigma.
a way. Like, certain clients I can see like once a month. So some therapists will be pretty flexible. Again, it can be troubleshooting versus therapy, or we'll have books that we can recommend. Or I'm a big fan of like peers getting together and like, hey, can we move through this book together?
Yeah.
But finding ways to, you know, go to those. When you go into a dungeon or a sexuality class and you see all these other people that are there at the same time, like some people are like, but what if I see my boss? And I'm like, yeah, you saw your boss. Like, your boss is trying to get their groove on too.
Monday.
Like that, you know. And that's one thing that in the BDSM culture, you do not out people.
Yeah.
So that if I see you at the dungeon on Saturday, I don't go in on Monday and be like, that was an amazing flogging scene. Like, oh my God, the way you took that. You know, or if I see you on the street, like, you're just like, unless we have previously negotiated, or I see you the next time, hey, like, you know, do you want to go coffee? If I see you on the street, can I say hi?
Yeah.
You negotiate that.
Yeah.
And not out of this, oh my God, I'm so afraid, but out of, again, self-respect and respect for the other human that you're connecting with. Again, and there's that expansive feeling. Sometimes I see people be so careful about constructing space just correctly. And I'm like, that ends up feeling mechanistic too. We do it because we respect and care for ourselves and others.
You know what I found about that,
Absolutely.
especially with really learning more about non-binary communities, is like, I get so worried about making a mistake on pronouns that I make a mistake on pronouns. Like, if you're like too careful. So, you know, people understand, especially if you're have a good heart and you're being curious and you're really, it's clear you're trying, like, they'll understand and let you mess up. Like, it's okay.
Right, apologize and keep it pushing, and keep practicing.
Yeah.
And I absolutely have made mistakes. There was definitely a time in my life I am not proud of where I did not understand about pronouns, and some of the stuff that I said, I look back and I'm like, wow, Jamila, that was really like dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And having compassion for who I was, and that is never going to happen again. So when these mistakes happen, to apologize, look the person in the eye, and then move on, like, and then make that mark in your head. Yeah. How do I remember for this person? Yeah. Which means slowing down. Yeah. Which is something humans hate to do.
Well, we don't advocate for that on this show at all. We never talk about slowing down and doing, this whole thing is a slow down. Like, you talk to people and like.
Be there.
Yeah. And all of this, I just keep coming back to, like, this is expansive when you do slow down and you talk and you check in with people and you let yourself be seen and you let another person be seen. It feels really good.
Oh my goodness.
It feels so good.
Like, that is what I love about BDSM, is you can get to know somebody in an hour. Yeah. That, like, and you haven't had, to me, it's some of the safest sex you can have. You can actually have orgasms. You haven't necessarily exchanged bodily fluids. Yeah. But both of you walk away like, I just knew somebody in that moment. No pretense, no hiding, just you and me.
Yeah. You said to me off camera at some point that you can tell a lot about a person's, how they feel about sex and just how they talk or what they, is it the opposite too? Like, when you're in these sexual experiences and you don't know anything about who they are as a person, you start to go, oh, like, I know who this person is.
Yeah, there's a sense of, I can't get a read on, like, are they a cat person or a dog person? Because I'm definitely weighted more heavily in, like, cat liking people. But there's
really, we're a dog studio here.
I would still like the dog. I could still be like, okay, you're cute and fluffy. Like, I got you. But there's a sense of, like, if they can communicate and make me feel safe, particularly as a bottom, in this highly vulnerable space, if they're aware of temperature for me, if they're aware of how I'm positioned, if they're wanting to look in my face as they do the thing, then this tells me, like, this is somebody capable of doing this in other circumstances.
Compassionate, they have empathy, they're a connector.
Right.
They're a relator.
Right, they're a relator.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to see them. One of my favorite stories, I don't do pickup play as much anymore, and pickup play is like you go to a dungeon and see if you're interested and somebody else is interested, and then do the play.
So as opposed to when you talk about scenes, like you already know, you've already kind of committed.
Right, we're going to go on Saturday, and we're going to do this thing that we've already pre-planned.
Yeah.
So I did pickup play with this person, and I watched him talk with some people. I listened to what he said about the play that he did, and something in me said, oh, I want to see if we can play. So we ended up playing 2 hours. It was so sensuous and sexy and fabulous and phenomenal. I never saw him again. Like, he never came back to the dungeon, never saw him again. It's now, I saw him after 8 years, 9 years at a convention recently. Wild. And still have that same feeling of like, that was a beautiful experience. I didn't need to become part of your life. I didn't need to become like in a relationship with you. Yeah. But that was so incredible that it stayed with me for 9 years. And I told him that, and he's like, that's amazing, I remember you. I'm like, I remember you. And it's like that. Yeah. That's possible. And
that was like a surprise in your day when you reconnected with him.
Totally. It was at the beginning of the day. I was totally nervous about going to this thing. Yeah. And here he popped up 9 years later.
Nice. I like it. All right. One more question. And I know this is a loaded question too, but you're doing good. Okay. You're taking the loaded ones, and you got it. All right. So there's not a one-size approach to achieving and receiving sexual pleasure. We know that. What can you say to encourage people to take more personal responsibility in their own sexual pleasure?
I think I'm a fan of pairing things. That wine is great, but wine and cheese is better. And, you know, sex is great, but sex with lube is better. And so, like, you can't, if you're trying to go for something, you have to have something to link it to. Yeah. You know, same thing, like, doing work with trauma, if I didn't concentrate on getting people to have pleasurable circumstances, this isn't possible. So you have to pair things together to give you, like, stereo vision to move forward. So I think when it comes to how to take more personal responsibility, I would say take a lateral step and recognize that you're valuable, that you are your own mansion. There are all these doors within you, all these worlds within you, and can you open the door and see what's in there? And it's okay to need somebody else to do that. There's been places that I was scared to go, and so I would turn to a friend or a play partner and say, like, this is what's on my mind, or a sex partner, I want to try this. And they would guide me through it. And I would say, like, sometimes I don't breathe, like I'll lose track of my breathing. And so one of my asks for partners is like, please breathe for me, like set the pace of the breathing so I can track you, so I can stay here. That will help me. And so for me, that's personal responsibility of this is what I need to be able to do this. But it's because I was curious about, oh, what helps me stay? What helps me be here and do this? So be curious about yourself, be curious about the other person. You know, I think about, like, sex should not be like microwaved food where it's in its little containers separate from each other. Right, like that's so sterile. Sex is like, let stuff on your plate touch a little bit. Like, go make things. Like, we never say with food when somebody's like, oh, I like this and I like that, and I like to put these two things together. Like, we never go, oh my God, that's so, like, we don't judge it like the way that we do with sex. First time I had honey, very rich honey and blue cheese, blew my mind. But would never have thought that would go together. I had to taste it 2 more times to be like, is what just happened in my, like, is that real? Do that, be curious, keep tasting, share what you get back. And partner person, be curious with them. Don't take it as a personal affront if they like something different or if they need you to shift something. I try and encourage people to be aspirational with their language. I love it when you do this. This is very sexy for me. It feels good when you, instead of, can you not do that? That sucks, that hurt, like, try to find the language of the thing you want.
That's not expansive language, people.
It's not expansive language. No. You know, and your body is reacting. If you say, like, I don't like this, your body's like, we're tightening. If you say, oh, I do like this, your body will expand to follow that. So partners, particularly cis male partners, I encourage them and coach them, like, this is not a direct threat to you. This is not you're a horrible lover. If you want to become an amazing lover, open and listen. And what I found is most guys really do want to know how to be a great lover. And really, there's no technique. You just follow what the person says. And the person has to take ownership of, this will get me there. If I need it to be like on my hands and knees with my legs slightly bent and like you doing this while I do this, share that. Yeah. Make it happen.
I don't know why I was envisioning this while you're talking, but like Legos. Like, so you started by saying, take something that you know and add another piece. Legos. So, and let your partner, like who you're exploring with, like let them add their piece in there. You know? So
And
you don't have to have it all figured out.
Right. Like you will never have it all figured out.
Yeah.
So be in the moment.
And there's a difference, and this was awesome, by the way, this conversation. But to me, before this conversation, I was thinking of all of this as almost like fantasy play. But this is not, like, fantasy play is like trying to figure out every aspect and like, you know, it's almost like scripting a movie, but this is actually connective. Like, this is like, you know, dynamic, I have this thing, you like this thing, how can we make these two things work together? You know?
And if something isn't quite working, then it's like, oh, we discovered that this isn't quite working, so
we'll try
let's
something
adjust.
else. Right. Yeah.
And usually if you make room for the mistakes and the awkwardness, it becomes an amazing story. Like, remember the time like we lost track of the lube and it like was so slippery and it shot across the room and like you had to duck.
And the dog slid, or the cat, the dog slid across the room. Was that weird?
But it was a great moment. Let it become a story and take shape. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, I love it. This was so awesome. So awesome. We don't even, sometimes we ask off-topic questions. We don't even have time for that. I'm just going to skip. Who wants off-topic when you talk about sex? Come on.
I am never bored with the work I do.
Really?
Ever.
I know.
It never
How could you possibly be bored?
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, does the universe ever get boring?
No. All right. So I'm going to ask you, we're going to do two more things before we end the show. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is, or I'd like you to do, is I always invite the guests to give a heart swell, and what it is just like a shout out or just an acknowledgement to a person or group that's just like, I see you, you know, and express some emotions. The reason that I like doing this is just to encourage people to communicate. If anything, if like you got anything out of all of this, it's that, like to communicate, be curious, right? So first of all, are you willing to do one?
I will stumble my way through.
Okay. All right. Then if you're willing to do one, then just look at the camera and
go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, there's a couple things. This is Pride Month, and there's also been a lot going on with sex workers, and I'm going to get teary, but I want to send out the biggest heart swell to sex workers and queer folk and trans folk and gender non-binary, those of us leather folk, those of us who are on the edge, but are actually, we're dancing in chaos as we create new worlds. And sometimes, too often, we fall on off the edge. But that's why we have to cling to each other. And so I'm sending all the affection and all the admiration for people who continue to do change work, who do transformative work, who do the work that a lot of people are too scared to do. And these people who, like, I see you, and I am just, I could not survive without you. So to people like Polly Murray and Audre Lorde, to modern people like Adrienne Marie Brown, to what SWAP is doing, to all of us who are trying to survive on the edges and create something new. I love you.
I felt that. I got tissues if you need them. I felt that. Those are some courageous people too. Like when there is no guidelines, there's no road in front of them,
and there's
they're
no
just
protection.
Yeah, no protection, and they're just doing it. Like, I mean, I think it's like something to be authentic for me, but I'm a heterosexual. Like, it's not that hard, you know. Like, I have to go through some healing. It's not that courageous.
And that's what you do. You do when there is no world for you. You make it yourself.
Yeah.
And I am brought alive by people who do that.
Yeah. That's thank you for sharing that. That was in the top list of heart swells. I felt that. All right, so we get to do one more thing together. Okay. So I like to issue a social challenge of the week based on what we talked about today. Does anything come to mind? So it's just something I'm just encouraging people to try. You know, it could be. Well, it's got to be about sex.
I know. like wow.
yeah. And we probably have to do it for people that have a partner and people that don't. I think if we're going to offer a social challenge around what we just talked about, we've got to
keep it grounded in.
Yeah, those two things.
Well, because sex is my thing, but eroticism is kind of what surrounds that. People, please read Audre Lorde's The Erotic is Power. Read that. That is like still my guiding light. So I guess what I would ask, like if sex is something that you want to do, I'd ask that with the next orgasm that you have, that you dedicate it to something meaningful. Use that to like charge something. So yeah, have an orgasm, enjoy yourself. If sex and an orgasm is not what you want to do, find that thing that is erotic to you, that makes you feel most alive. And as you're doing that thing, send that wish out of whatever's meaningful, whatever world you want to create, send that wish out for that.
I could not come up with a better social challenge if I tried. I love that. Yeah, dedicate that to something.
Yes.
Love it. Love it.
I'm like, when can I do that? Probably 10 o'clock tonight.
Good job. I'm like, yeah, I know what's on everybody's list in here. All right, cool. My parents are watching, so I got to be cool. Or not. All right. So,
you too.
Yeah, you too.
Just don't tell us.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about it though. That's something else. That's something else. All right. So it was my pleasure to have you on. This was amazing. I'm going to share your website. It's just jamiladawson.com. She is on Instagram at Everyday Erotica and
Everyday Erotic.
Everyday Erotic. Don't mess that up. And Twitter by your name, and I'll share all of that so people can get a hold of you. And if you take the social challenge, we want to know. If you want to tell, you want to share, you
would love to hear.
If you don't, it's cool. So thank you for being here. This was an awesome show.
You. Yeah, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm like all like, whew.
Good, I'm glad. She's going to smoke a cigarette afterwards. I might smoke a cigarette afterwards. Okay, next show, it's kind of along the same lines. It's not about sex, but I'm talking to, reconnecting with a friend I haven't seen in a long time named Francis that is the greatest community builder. And he's looking at different ways to really do that and cultivate that, like alternative ways to really bring people together. So we're gonna be talking about community and like how to like create your own. If it's not there, like you're talking, your heart's well, like if you don't have it, like what are some of the tools to like bring people together and stay in community and yeah, so
fabulous.
That's what we're going to be talking about. Other than that, next PSE is here in the space on Thursday, June 28th. And as always, you'll love how I sign off the show. I just encourage people to relate with more curiosity. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.